I am going to tell you the story of how I cheated on my husband with 3 young men. They really made me happy and gave me the best nights of my life. If you want to know all the details and how my husband reacts, watch until the end. I never thought my life would take such a drastic turn at 45 years old. My name is Isabel, and I live in Barcelona, where I work as a cleaner. I have been married for 20 years to Javier, a man who used to be the love of my life, but over time has become little more than a roommate. We have 2 teenage children who are just starting to make their lives, and I felt increasingly invisible and forgotten. Everything changed the day I was assigned to clean an apartment near the university. It was an apartment shared by 3 students, and from the first moment I walked through the door, I knew something was going to be different. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and old books transported me back to a time I thought I had forgotten, when I too was young and full of dreams. It was Mateo who greeted me that first morning. At 21, he was the oldest of the 3 roommates. Tall, with dark, curly hair and green eyes that seemed to read the soul. He explained where things were and let me do my work. But I couldn't help but notice how he gave me a sidelong glance as he pretended to study at the dining room table. The first few weeks passed without incident. I would go, clean up and leave, barely exchanging a few words with Mateo or one of his classmates if we happened to run into each other. But little by little, the conversations grew longer. Mateo began to ask me questions about my life, showing a genuine interest I hadn't felt in years from anyone. One day, while I was cleaning the kitchen, Mateo approached me and asked if I wanted a coffee. I accepted, more out of politeness than desire. But that coffee turned into an hour of chatting, in which I told him about my marriage, my children, my abandoned dreams. He listened to me with an attention that made me feel important, valued. You know, Isabel, he told me with a shy smile. I've always felt a special attraction to older women. They have a wisdom and a confidence that you don't find in girls my age. Her words made me blush, like a schoolgirl. It had been years since anyone had paid me such a compliment, and, although I knew it was wrong, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement in my chest. From that day on, my visits to the apartment became more than just work. I started dressing up more, putting on a little makeup, taking better care of my appearance. I felt rejuvenated with every visit, with every conversation with Mateo. It was he who introduced me to his roommates, Alejandro and Diego. Alejandro was the youngest, just 19, blonde and blue-eyed, with a smile that lit up the room. Diego, 20, was more serious and reserved, but with an intensity in his eyes that made me shiver. All 3 began to show an interest in me that went beyond simple politeness. They asked me questions about my life, my experiences, my opinions. I felt valued not only as a woman, but as a person. It was a heady feeling that made me completely forget about my life outside those 4 walls. Little by little, my visits became longer. It was no longer unusual for me to stay for coffee or even to eat with them. I would cook them traditional dishes that my mother had taught me, and they would thank me as if I was giving them the greatest gift in the world. I remember one day in particular, I was preparing paella in the kitchen when Mateo came up behind me and whispered in my ear, "It smells delicious, Isabel, just like you." I felt a shiver run down my back, and for a moment I thought about pulling away, about drawing the line, but I didn't. I stayed there, feeling his breath on my neck, enjoying a closeness I hadn't experienced in years. Things started to get complicated when I noticed that not only Mateo was showing interest in me. Alejandro started looking for excuses to be at home when I went to clean. He would ask me for help with his college work, or just sit and chat with me while I cleaned. His youth and energy were contagious, and made me feel alive in a way I had forgotten. Diego, on the other hand, was more subtle. He never said anything directly, but I could feel his eyes following me around the room. Sometimes he would catch me staring when I thought I didn't notice, and when our gazes met, I would see a desire in his eyes that made me shiver. I found myself in a situation I never would have imagined. 3 young, attractive men showing interest in me, a middle-aged married woman. It was flattering, exciting, but also frightening. I knew I was playing with fire, that what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't help it. Every time I entered that apartment, it was as if I entered another world, one where I was desired, admired, valued. The visits became more frequent. I no longer just went on days when it was my turn to clean. I found excuses to stop by. I forgot something. I wanted to make sure everything was in order. Any excuse was a good one to go back to that apartment, to feel that excitement, that adrenaline rush again. My marriage was becoming a farce. I spent my nights thinking about Mateo, Alejandro, Diego. I compared my husband to them and felt guilty, but at the same time, I couldn't help it. Javier didn't even seem to notice the change in me. He was too absorbed in his work, in his routine. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the bathroom, Alejandro walked in unannounced. He apologized, but didn't come out. Instead, he just stared at me, with a mixture of nervousness and determination in his eyes. "Isabel," he said to me in a trembling voice, "I can't stop thinking about you. I know it's wrong. I know you're older than me, and I know you're married, but I can't help it. I like you. I like you so much." I froze, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to reject him, to tell him this couldn't be, but another part, a part I thought had been dead for a long time, wanted to throw myself into his arms, to feel his youth, his passion. Before I could respond, Alejandro came over and kissed me. It was an awkward, inexperienced kiss, but full of desire and emotion. For a moment, I let myself go, enjoying the feel of his lips against mine. But then reality hit me, and I pulled away. "This is wrong, Alejandro," I told him, though my voice didn't sound very convinced. "I'm a married woman. I could be your mother." "I don't care," he replied, with a determination that surprised me. "I've never felt this way about anyone. You're beautiful, intelligent, fascinating. I can't stop thinking about you." I left the bathroom in a hurry, confused and frightened by my own feelings, but Alejandro's kiss had awakened something in me, something I could no longer ignore. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt guilty about what had happened with Alejandro, but at the same time, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his lips on mine, his strong young body against mine. Mateo seemed to notice the change in my attitude. He became more attentive, more affectionate. One day, while we were alone in the kitchen, he came up to me and took my hand. "Isabel," he said to me, with a seriousness I had not seen in him before, "I know something is going on between you and Alejandro. I'm no fool, but I want you to know that my feelings for you are real. You are not a whim. You are not a fantasy. You are an amazing woman, and I am falling in love with you." Her words took my breath away. Physical attraction, desire, was one thing, but love, that was something completely different, something much more dangerous. "Mateo, I started to say, but he interrupted me with a kiss. Unlike Alejandro's kiss, Mateo's was confident, passionate. He knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. He kissed me as if I were the last woman on earth, and I responded with a passion I thought I had forgotten. When we broke apart, we were both breathless. We looked into each other's eyes, knowing we had crossed a line we could not uncross. "I don't know what to do," I confessed to him, feeling lost and excited at the same time. You don't have to do anything, Mateo replied, stroking my cheek. Just let yourself go. And so I did. I let myself be carried away by passion, by desire, by the thrill of feeling wanted and loved again. I knew it was wrong, that I was betraying my husband, my children, myself. But at that moment, in Mateo's arms, none of that mattered. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. My life had become a roller coaster of emotions. On the one hand, there was my family, my normal life. On the other, there was Mateo, Alejandro, and Diego, and the excitement and passion they made me feel. Diego, who until then had kept to himself, began to show more openly his interest in me. One afternoon, while the other two were in class, he surprised me in the kitchen. "Isabel," he said to me in his deep, serious voice, "I know what's going on with Mateo and Alejandro. I don't judge you, but I want you to know that I feel something for you, too. Something strong, something I can't ignore." I was speechless. How had I gotten into this situation? 3 young, attractive men, all interested in me. It was like a dream, but also like a nightmare. I knew this couldn't end well, that someone was going to get hurt, probably everyone. "Diego, I started to say, but he interrupted me. "You don't have to say anything," he told me, leaning closer. "I just want you to know that I'm here, that I want you, that I admire you, and that if you ever want to be with me, I'll be waiting." His words took my breath away. The intensity of his gaze, the seriousness of his voice, everything about him attracted me in a different way than Mateo or Alejandro. It was as if each of them awakened a different part of me. The next few days were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and desires. I felt torn between my duty and my desires. Every time I entered that apartment, it was as if I entered another world, a world where I was the center of attention, where I was desired and admired. My story is not over yet. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you. Back to the story. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the living room, the 3 boys came home from college together. They sat on the couch, looking at me with a mixture of desire and nervousness that made me shudder. "Isabel," Mateo began, "we've been talking. We know the 3 of us have feelings for you, and we know you have feelings for us too." My heart began to pound. Where was he going with this? "We don't want you to have to choose," Alejandro continued. "We don't want to fight with each other over you." "What we mean," Diego interjected, "is that we are willing to share you. If you want to, of course." I gasped. Were they suggesting what I thought they were suggesting? It was crazy. It was impossible. It was tempting. "You don't have to decide anything now," Matthew said, noticing my confusion. "Just think about it. We could be happy, all of us together." I walked out of there with my head spinning. His proposal was crazy, but I couldn't deny that a part of me felt excited at the idea. Could I really have all 3 of them? Could I enjoy Mateo's passion, Alejandro's sweetness, and Diego's intensity? The next few days were torture. I couldn't stop thinking about his proposal, about the possibilities that opened up before me. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined their hands on my body, their lips kissing me, their strong young bodies against mine. Finally, I made a decision. I knew it was wrong, that it went against everything I had been taught, everything I believed, but I could not deny my feelings, my desires. The next time I went to the apartment, the 3 of them were waiting for me. Without saying a word, I approached them and kissed them, one by one. First Mateo, then Alejandro, and finally Diego. It was as if an electric current ran through my body. "Yes," I told them simply. "Yes to everything." What followed was an explosion of passion and desire like I had never experienced before. The four of us surrendered ourselves to a dance of bodies and emotions that defied description. It was intense. It was beautiful. It was liberating. From that day on, my life was divided into two completely separate parts. On the one hand, there was my normal life, my marriage, my children, my work. On the other, there was Mateo, Alejandro, and Diego, and the passion and desire we shared. Every time I went to the apartment, it was like entering another world, a world where I was the center, a world where I was the center of attention, where I was desired and loved in a way I had never experienced before. Each of them brought me something different, satisfying different parts of me that I had forgotten existed. Mateo was the intellectual one, the one who challenged me mentally. Our conversations could last for hours, talking about books, politics, philosophy. He made me feel intelligent, valued by my mind as much as my body. When we were together, it was as if time stood still. His kisses were passionate, but also tender, as if he wanted to savor every moment with me. Alejandro was pure energy and joy. His youth and enthusiasm were contagious. He made me laugh like I hadn't laughed in years. He made me feel light and carefree. In his arms, I forgot all my responsibilities and worries. His caresses were playful, exploratory, always discovering new ways to make me feel pleasure. Diego, on the other hand, was pure intensity. His seriousness and maturity beyond his years attracted me in an almost magnetic way. When we were together, the outside world disappeared. There was only the two of us, our bodies, our desire. His strong hands roamed my body with a security that made me tremble with anticipation. The four of us together were like a perfectly tuned symphony. Each knew exactly what to do, what to say, to make me feel loved and desired. There was no jealousy between them, no competition. There was only the desire to please me, to make me happy. But as time went on, guilt began to grow inside me. Every time I came home and saw Javier, I felt as if I was wearing a neon sign over my head, announcing my infidelity. My children, though teenagers and absorbed in their own lives, sometimes looked at me in a way that made me wonder if they suspected something. One night, after a particularly intense session with the three boys, I came home feeling especially guilty. Javier was awake, waiting for me in the kitchen. "Isabel," he said to me in a voice I couldn't decipher, "can we talk?" My heart stopped for a moment. Did he know? Had someone said something to him? I sat across from him, trying to remain calm. "Sure. What's up?" I asked, trying to make my voice sound normal. "I've noticed that you've been different lately," he began. "More distant, more absent. Is there something you want to tell me?" For a moment, I considered confessing everything, telling him about Mateo, Alejandro, and Diego, about how they made me feel, about how I had rediscovered parts of me I thought were lost forever. But the words got stuck in my throat. "No, nothing's wrong," I lied. "I've just been tired from work, that's all." Javier looked at me for a long moment, as if he wanted to see right through me. Finally, he nodded. "It's okay," he said. "I just want you to know that I love you, Isabel. No matter what happens, I will always love you." His words were like a dagger in my heart. How could I do this to a man who loved me so much? But at the same time, how could I give up the passion and joy I had found with Mateo, Alejandro, and Diego? The next few days were torture. Every time I went to the boys' apartment, guilt gnawed at my insides. But the moment I walked through that door, the moment I felt their hands on me, everything disappeared. There were only the four of us, our bodies, our desire. One afternoon, while we were all together in bed, Mateo looked at me with a seriousness that made me shudder. "Isabel," he said, "are you happy with us?" The question took me by surprise. Was I happy? Yes, I was. Happier than I had been in years. But that happiness came with a price. A price I was finding harder and harder to pay every day. "Yes," I finally answered. "I am happy with you. Happier than I've been in a long time." "Then stay with us," Alejandro said, taking my hand. "Leave your husband. Come live here. We can make you happy, the three of us." The proposal took my breath away. To leave Javier? To leave my life? My family? For these three young men? It was madness. It was impossible. I can't, I finally said, tears running down my cheeks. "I love all three of you, but I have a family. I have responsibilities." Diego hugged me tightly. "We understand," he said in his gravelly voice, "but I want you to know that we will always be here for you, no matter what." That night, as I drove home, I made a decision. I couldn't go on living like this, torn between two worlds. I had to choose, and even though it hurt my soul, I knew what the right choice was. The next day, I went to the apartment for the last time. I explained my decision, between tears and goodbye kisses. It was the hardest moment of my life, leaving behind that passion, that joy, that love I had found with them. Going back to my normal life was like waking up from a wonderful dream to find myself in a gray and monotonous reality. But little by little, day by day, I began to rediscover the love for my family, for my life. Javier noticed the change in me, and although I never told him the truth, I think he somehow sensed it. We began to work on our marriage, to reconnect, to rediscover why we had fallen in love in the first place. It wasn't easy. There were times when the temptation to go back to that apartment, back into the arms of Mateo, Alejandro, and Diego, was almost unbearable. But I stood firm in my decision. I knew that what I had lived with them had been beautiful, but I also knew that it was not real. It was not sustainable. It was a fantasy, a dream from which I had to wake up. Years have passed since then, and although I still sometimes think of them, of what we experienced together, it is no longer with longing or regret. It is with gratitude for showing me parts of myself that I had forgotten, for making me feel alive again. My marriage to Javier is stronger than ever. We have grown together, we have overcome obstacles, we have rediscovered our love, and even though I sometimes wonder, what if? I know I made the right decision, because at the end of the day, true love is not just about passion and desire. It's about commitment, it's about loyalty, it's about building a life together. And that's what I have with Javier, what I always had, even though for a while I forgot it. Mateo, Alejandro, and Diego will always hold a special place in my heart. They were my awakening, my rebirth. But Javier is my home, my anchor, my true love. And so, as I look out the window of our home in Barcelona, with Javier by my side and our grown children visiting us for dinner, I can't help but smile. Because despite everything, despite my mistakes and my doubts, I have found happiness. A real, lasting happiness, based on love and mutual respect. And although sometimes, in the darkest nights, my mind wanders back to those days of passion and madness, it is no longer with longing, but with a sweet nostalgia. Because those moments made me who I am today, helped me to value what I have, to appreciate the true and lasting love I share with Javier. I look at my husband, who smiles at me with that love that has endured through the years, through hardships and secrets, and I know I made the right decision, because at the end of the day, it is this love, this commitment, this life we have built together that really matters. And as the sun sets over Barcelona, tinting the sky orange and pink, I realize that I am truly happy. Not with the ephemeral and passionate happiness I felt with Mateo, Alejandro, and Diego, but with a deep and lasting happiness, a happiness that comes from knowing who I am, from loving and being loved, from having found my place in the world. And so, with a smile on my lips and peace in my heart, I close this chapter of my life. Because although I enjoyed every minute of my time with the young people, although every caress and every kiss is engraved in my memory, I know that my true happiness is here, in this life that I have chosen, in this love that I have cultivated. And as Javier takes me by the hand and leads me to the table where our family awaits us, I know I wouldn't trade this for anything in the world, because this is my home, my life, my true love. And there is no fantasy, no matter how exciting, that can compare to the reality of a love that has survived the tests of time and come out stronger. So yes, I enjoyed my time with the young people. I felt wanted, admired, alive. But here, in Javier's arms, in the heart of my family, is where I truly belong. And there is nothing in the world that can make me forget the abandonment of my marriage, because it no longer exists. We have built something new, something beautiful, something that will last forever. And as night falls over Barcelona, as the stars begin to shine in the sky, I know I have found my happy ending. Not in a fantasy of youth and passion, but in the reality of true and lasting love. And that, more than anything, is what makes me smile every day. What makes me grateful for every moment. What makes me love the life I have chosen to live.